A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. Jesus said, I am the good shepherd. A good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. A hired man who is not a shepherd and whose sheep are not his own sees a wolf coming and leaves the sheep and runs away, and the wolf catches and scatters them. This is because he works for pay and has no concern for the sheep. I am the good shepherd, and I know mine, and mine know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I will lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that do not belong to this fold. These also I must lead, and they will hear my voice, and there will be one flock, one shepherd. This is why the Father loves me, because I lay down my life in order to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down on my own. I have power to lay it down and power to take it up again. This command I have received from my Father. The Gospel of the Lord. Today is called Good Shepherd Sunday, and Good Shepherd Sunday because we read John chapter 10 with a famous gospel which talks, Jesus identifies himself as the Good Shepherd. It's a day when we pray for, it's World Day of Prayer for Vocations, so we're praying for vocations for all of them. We thank God today for all the shepherds. As you know, the first shepherds we had were our mother and our father, weren't they? And they were good shepherds, keeping us from running in the street and everything else, passing on the faith to us. And then, St. Thomas says there's an ordo in who we should be most thankful for. Number one is God, who brought us into the world out of nothing and sustains us, right? If he were to take his hand away, we would cease to exist. Secondly, we should thank God for our parents. They're always number two. With his help, they brought us into the world and then cared for us in such a very important time when we were so vulnerable. And he says number three is teachers, and especially teachers of the faith. Those religious sisters who labored in our Catholic schools all over the world to teach us about Jesus, God rest their souls. You know how many children they taught about Jesus, and other teachers that taught us religion. And of course, we know our pastors. The word in Latin, pastore, literally means shepherd. That's what our priests are supposed to be, to take care of God's people. You see in the bulletin, there's our newsletter for the spring for vocation, the vocation office. And the poster boy is Jared right here, going to be talking to us tonight. He's on the front page, so you can get his autograph later if you'd like. And Jared so today is the day when we do pray for vocations of the priesthood and religious life. As you know, I travel and talk to priests in different dioceses around the country. And I have to tell you that very commonly when priests come to talk to me for spiritual direction, they begin by saying, Father, in one of my parishes, ... And I'm always going, in my diocese, no priest has more than one parish. In the Diocese of Savannah, we don't have any priestless parishes. Now, we have missions. They were little tiny places that never had their own priest, and they're not big enough to have their own priest. And so a pastor will be in one little parish and take care of that mission. But everywhere I go, because of what happened with so many, when the immigration of so many Catholics from different countries, like in the Cincinnati area on the river there, you'll have in one tiny little village a Polish Catholic church, an Irish Catholic church, an Italian Catholic church, and you can see one from the porch of the other. And often they have their own school. And now those differences and those parishes are not sustainable. And usually one priest is the pastor of all those three places. And that's a great stress on these priests. 3 parish councils, 3 finance committees, 3 buildings that are decaying. You follow me? And so we're so blessed in the Diocese of Savannah. But one of the reasons is because we only have 80,000 Catholics. and they have like 500,000, right? And also because we have only around 55 parishes with 20 missions attached to some of them, and yet we have 100 active priests and about another 23 retired priests. And so per capita, the Diocese of Savannah is actually doing very well in that sense, but our presbyterate is getting older, and we continue to pray for priests because there are many of our larger parishes that could easily have 2 or 3 more priests doing so much important work. But for that reason, I always love coming home to my Diocese of Savannah, and where no priest says, Father, in one of my parishes. We're praying today in our Diocese of Savannah. Please take this newsletter home and take a look at it. We're praying for 30 seminarians in our diocese, because if we got 30 seminarians in the 7, 8, 9-year program by which men are being ordained now, we would, with the normal attrition rates, ordain 2 to 3 new priests a year. And for our Diocese of Savannah, that would more than suffice to staff the parishes and the missions that we have. And that's a very, very reachable goal. That's why we pray the 11th Ave, one extra Hail Mary after every decade of the Rosary, that the Lord will give us 30 seminarians and help us to attain that and maintain it. So I want to invite Jared Miller, who's come to visit with us. He's going to tell us a little bit about how God called him to become a priest, and then you can get his autograph later.
Yeah, so it's always an honor to be back on the coast. My home parish is Early Star of the Sea in St. Mary's, Georgia. I'm from Woodbine, Georgia, which is exit 14 on 95. That's where my dad's a Georgia native to that area, born and raised. And just a little background, even like my own family, how a Georgia boy from that area to become Catholic. My mother, she's originally from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, a Polish family. And when she turned 18, she decided to move south. In St. Mary's, there's a nuclear sub-base, Kings Bay, I'm sure you heard of. And my uncle was part of the initial fleet that came in to start building up the base, and he was a welder in the Navy. And so my mom decided to follow him down as soon as she turned 18 and get away from the North. And it's a cute little story how my parents met. My dad he worked for the county right out of high school. He drove the mosquito truck sprayer for the county. And my mom, she started working for the landfill. She would drive the dump trucks up the hill backwards. They always said she was the best at driving the dump truck up the hill. And my dad and mom, that's where they would clock in. It was at the weight station at the landfill. That's where they met. So they met at the dump kind of thing. So it's very, very romantic. But that's kind of how like the Catholic family and my parents met, and my dad eventually converted. And for a little while there, like just in a sense that like they kind of fell away from the church. But I have 2 older brothers. I'm the youngest of 3, 3 boys, and we're all 5 years apart. And my brothers were at the sacrament age. That's when my mom questioned my father to bring us back into the church because sacraments were coming up. And so that was the initial of coming back into the church. For me and my vocation, I kind of tell my story. It's a double layer because I started my discernment in high school, actually. When I was in high school, I was very involved in a club called Skills USA, and I competed in carpentry. I kind of thought that's, like, my whole family's tradespeople, and I thought, like, carpentry would be a quick way to make money and have a successful life. No thinking about college or anything. So that's one layer of what I was discerning. But also, I kind of, after receiving confirmation, I kind of took my faith a little more serious. And the initial call, I say that happened was when I was in 10th grade. I was at our Diocesan Youth Conference. I started getting involved in my youth group, and that was the first retreat I've been on. And it was the first time I've ever been to adoration. I remember it vividly. It was 2015, and the theme was Blessed are the Pure of Heart. It was in Perry at the fairgrounds. And I remember in adoration, the priest that was doing procession with the monstrance was physically crying. I just saw something in that. And I remember closing my eyes, and I felt the presence of the Lord in the Eucharist. That really touched my heart. That made me think about, what was this? Who is this? And I went home, and so in my town, we only have one high school for the whole county, Camden County High School. My graduating class was 650 students, and only 5 of us were Catholic out of the group. And our families were tight, like our parish is tight in that sense of like, we were very close. We were always at each other's house, and we confided in each other amongst our faith. And one of my best friends, a good Irish family, his name was Canute Jones. He's a Marine now, pray for him. But he was in my construction class. He was doing electrical management in that class, and he was competing in like the electrical stuff in our competitions. And I was doing carpentry, he was doing electrical. And so I was just talking to him about this weekend. I went on, and he said, dude, I think you're discerning. So he gave me this book you may have heard called To Save 1,000 Souls, written by none other than Father Brett, who I didn't know at the time. And so I started reading this book. I was in high school. I was on the bus. I'll start reading it. And one of the stories that Father Brett often talks about vocation is the biblical story, Jonah and the whale. And in my prayer, it kept coming up over and over again. And in my own way, it became like a notion of like following a breadcrumb where God was revealing himself in little moments. A second time that it revealed itself was actually at one of my youth group meetings. We were playing headbands, like I know the game, like you put a word on your forehead, and like people give you like references. You try to guess what the word is, and the word on my head was Jonah the whale. And my friends were like fish, water, blubber, and one of the deacons was playing. He was like Nineveh. I was like Nineveh. What's Nineveh? He's like, come on, man. Like, Jonah the whale betrayed Nineveh. Like, every child should know this story, And so I was like, yeah, okay, there it is. Yeah, Jonah the whale. And so it just kept coming up. And I just went about it. I heard it. And then as a couple years go on, I was continuing my faith, living it out. And I remember, so my home pastor, Father Marius Fuchs, a young Polish priest, was on fire, came to my parish. And I remember it was Good Shepherd Sunday, what we're celebrating this weekend, and he was given this great homily. It was like, and it really spoke to me. And I said, maybe it's the first time I should like tell someone other than my immediate friends. And so I went to the sacristan and said, hey, Father, I think I'm discerning. He's like, oh, really? In his Polish accent. And he's like, I was, Father, like, what do I do now? Like, I'm only in high school. Like, what am I doing? How do I better think about this? And he said, just stay involved in the parish. Like, you're very involved. Altar serve, usher, join the nights, teach at the Sunday school. So he's like, one of the things that really stuck with me was he said that when you altar serve, this is the closest place that you can get to Christ. And for you to discern, be close to Christ in the Eucharist. And this is like what my whole discernment is circled around is the Eucharist, right? That's what all of our lives should be focused around, our day-to-day life. And yeah, it made sense. And so I was just kept staying involved. And he said there'll be a point where, the parish can supply you so much. And then there'll be a moment where you have to take it on. You make the movement to go forward. And so it was one day I was just praying, and I decided to reach out to Father Pablo Magoni, who was the vocation director back then. And I started going on the different diocesan retreats to think about vocation. And it was funny because I didn't tell my parents yet still. I would tell them I'm going to a friend's house and we go to these church events. It's funny because it's like the opposite. Like kids would do, I'm going to this church event, I'm going to a friend's house. Yeah. But and so it was my senior year actually. It was like I was about to graduate. I was working at Ace Hardware in town. One of my best friends, his parents owned the hardware store. And and so she was like, my mom said, I know you're doing the construction stuff. Like, what's the plan after graduation? I was like, I think I'm gonna go to seminary. She's like, what? There's other ways to serve the church, right? And I said, no, Mom, I think this is where God wants me to go. And if I go, there's no harm in it. I'll only just be a better man. No one's forcing me there. No one's holding a gun to my head and said, you have to do this. Like, it's in that freedom. And I think that stuck with her, like, okay. She thought about it, and a couple of days later, she said, I could totally see you being a priest. And that meant a lot, because like I was totally I wanted to make sure on my own that like this is where God wanted me to go. And so at the same time, Archbishop Hartmeyer had a rule about guys out of high school to go to college first. So I was like, well, I wasn't planning on going to college, so I went in, did the SAT dry, and went in to college at Coastal Georgia in Brunswick. I did a year there. And then there was another one of our seminarians, Noah Pace, who was finishing his second year at Augusta University. And this one day I was at work, and Father Pablo called me and said, hey, we're thinking about sending to this college seminary in Louisiana, St. Joe's Seminary College, and I want you and Noah to go check it out and see if it's a good spot to send y'all. I was like, shoot, yeah, I'm definitely up for that. And so that's where I met Noah at, and it's very peaceful. It's 1,200 acres. It's ran by the Benedictines. It's a very manly seminary. They're very good at doing work, and which, as the carpenter, like I was very attracted to that, right? And so I remember when I got there, Father Gregory, who was the rector at the time, now he's the abbot of the monastery, he said, we have a couple guys visiting from Savannah, and y'all haven't seen here since the 70s, and the last guy here was Father Gabriel Cummings. And Father Gabe Cummings was my home pastor growing up, baptized and brought my parents back to the church, baptized, did my sacraments. And that really like reassured me that like I felt peace there. And that's when I knew that like this is where God wanted me to be at this moment. And so I went in that next year. I've been in 6 years now. So yeah, it's just like one day at a time, continuing. But in a way, I think there's like a natural beauty to that. Like in our vocation, like it's not at that moment that you realize, but when you look back at it, you see God's work there. And I think that's something that's very beautiful in my story. I think that like as I look back, I can see God in those moments of guiding me in the way where He wants me to go. And as continuing on, like every day, just being able to look back and see where I've seen God in the day. And so I ask for your continued prayers. Next summer's diaconate ordination, and the year after that, 2026, is priesthood ordination. So thank you all so much.